It is starting to really feel like Christmas here in the farmhouse. With winter coming, the wood stove is clean and ready for fires. The bone broth is simmering on the stove. Soup ingredients, root veggies, meat stocked in the freezer. We're putting the garden to bed and the light is cozy. So join me for a late November day at home. This particular day in our kitchen is an exceptionally lovely one because it's warm outside. We can open up the windows and air the house out, something that I really like to do anytime the weather is above, 55, 60 degrees. I like to get the window, at least in the kitchen, open a little bit. We do have this vintage stove. It's a 1949 caloric. I get asked about it sometimes. We had it fully restored, but the insulation on those old things isn't the best. It's very heavy, very nice stove from what I understand. The only thing that could ever go wrong with it is the thermostat. We had to replace that. But other than that, it functions beautifully, but it does heat up the kitchen. And so I'm really loving, now that it's a little bit cooler, I feel justified in opening a window and leaving that stove cranked all day long. Sourdough bread in and out of it, roasts, pies, roasted vegetables. We have had many days where the oven has stayed on the entire day. In preparation for winter coming, Luke put the garden to bed. He covered a lot of the beds with leaves and compost. He pulled the dahlia tubers out so that they could dry out, and then he'll bring them in so they don't freeze and we can plant them again next year. They expanded quite a bit, so we should have a lot more dahlias next year. Now, this past season, a few volunteer flowers came up, like a Mexican sunflower. I used an app on my phone to tell me what it was called. It really took things over, and so our dahlias didn't get the chance to thrive that they deserved. We could have pulled the Mexican sunflowers, but they really drew in a lot of monarch butterflies, which we enjoyed looking at. So I think next year we're going to plant the dahlias somewhere else, give them their own special spot outside of the garden. The way our day is structured most of the time is during morning chores. The boys move the chicken coop, Luke milks the cow, they water all the animals, collect eggs. I start on some chores indoors, like cleaning the kitchen, making lunch, doing a load of laundry, tidying up with either whatever little kids didn't go out. This time of year, it's a little bit more challenging because in order to get kids outside, it requires getting them entirely suited up unless it's a warm day, which we've been actually having quite a few in November. But there's been a lot of cold days too, and I know upcoming there will be more cold days than not. Requires me to get on their overalls, their coats, gloves if it's really cold, or hats. But I am challenging myself this year to take the time to do all of that because the younger kids especially thrive when they have that outside time. Just like an adult, whenever you get up, you're feeling a little bit lazy, you don't really want to do that. They protested a bit. They don't necessarily want to go outside in the cold. But once they're out there and they're properly dressed so that it's not too uncomfortable, they really love it. They feel better. They're more well-behaved. And when it's sunny, it's really, my husband says, it's more enjoyable to be outside on a sunny, cold day than a hot day. Now, I don't know if I can fully agree with that, but I will say, especially here in Missouri, there really is very rarely weather so bad that the boys can't get outside, and the girls too. I only say the boys because they're the ones I have to personally deal with because that's where all the younger kids are boys. The girls can take care of themselves. They can get themselves ready to go outside. It's not necessarily something that's a big deal to me because they're teenagers, and so they can go outside if they want. My little kids at this time are all boys. Currently with 4 boys, 5 and under, outside time isn't just a nice thing, it's a necessity. As a busy mother of 8 and a nursing one at that, I have been pregnant or nursing for 15 years, no, more than 15 years. It is very important that along with a healthy from scratch diet and exercise, which I'm trying to get better about, that I keep up with the other essential vitamins. And I want to say thank you to today's video sponsor, Ritual. This is Ritual's essential vitamin for women ages 18 plus. It is specifically a postnatal vitamin, which means that it is formulated with key high quality nutrients to help fill common dietary gaps. It's non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, major allergen-free, and I really love that it is free from artificial colorants. It's designed to support foundational health with key nutrients to support brain health, bone health, blood building, and antioxidant support. Ritual is made traceable, which means that it's backed by the first visible supply chain of its kind. So you know where the labeled ingredients come from and why they're there. It's also that you can feel confident in the vitamins you're taking every single day. Ritual goes above and beyond industry standard with their third-party testing. Every batch is tested for heavy metals, microbes, and allergens. If you've been thinking about trying Ritual, now is a great time to do that. For a limited time, Ritual is offering 40% off. You can scan my QR code here or use my link in the description box below. Again, thank you so much to Ritual for sponsoring today's video. For this morning's kitchen happenings, the first thing I did was bake the previous day's bread. I'm in a really good routine right now of baking bread every day. We can easily go through 2 loaves of bread, so making 1 batch of my artisan no knead loaf, that's over on my blog, farmhouseonboone.com, is perfect if I do it every single day. Now today, when I'm going to make more bread, I noticed that I have hardly any sourdough starter. That's okay. You don't have to follow recipes super rigid. The sourdough component is meant to make the bread rise. It's the yeast component. If you have a little bit of yeast, it will eventually leaven the whole lump, as the Bible says. And so I'm just pouring in what I have and then feeding the starter fresh flour and water so that I have more for making more bread tomorrow. If there is anything I've learned the last 16 years as a homemaker in the kitchen every single day, is how to be resourceful, how to adapt whenever you don't have everything on hand, how to quickly pivot and still accomplish a version of what you were intending to do in the first place without having perfectly everything that you need. So in today's case, I want to make some bread again for tomorrow. I only have probably a 1/4 cup or less of sourdough starter, but that is totally fine. And I know that it'll still work well because I've done this before. I have encountered wanting to make sourdough bread with not enough starter before. It's not unfamiliar territory for me. On my last Azure Standard haul, Luke went to pick it up and he said that we had an embarrassing amount of stuff. The pile just kept getting bigger and bigger. I was just trying to stock the kitchen so that I don't have to worry about much grocery shopping. One thing I got is a big box of acorn squash. Now couple that with recently getting a whole hog and telling the butcher to put a lot of that meat into sausage and bacon. As much into sausage as possible is usually my goal because it's such an easy meat to thaw out. It goes in so many things. With all that being said, I am making stuffed acorn squash. I also got a big box of apples. So today we're going to make applesauce. We're going to make stuffed acorn squash with apples in it. We still have onions from the garden. Really loving all of these autumn flavors. I would say a couple times a week, my daughter likes to make a pie. She loves to be in the kitchen. She loves learning about the kitchen economy, how meals come together. And one of her favorite things to make is pie. So if you see in my kitchen a lot of desserts and elaborate things like homemade cheesecakes and homemade chocolate pudding pies, toasted meringue, and ice cream, that's because I have one particular teenager who loves doing that. Now, my other older daughter, she doesn't care about the kitchen too much. I need to get her in here more often. My oldest son, he's in the kitchen a lot as well. He really loves it. He is especially interested in woodworking. So Luke set him up a shop in the barn. He makes a lot of wooden toys and we have a couple of homeschool markets that he gets to sell them at. The garden is really, really dwindling down. We have carrots still and some herbs that are starting to look a little bit sparse, but I can still get thyme and sage and parsley out of the garden, which is great for all of these fall dishes, especially the sage. It is just one of the flavors of the season for me. Now, a lot of you wonder, do my kids really eat this food? Do I have any picky kids? So the answer to that is yes, they really eat it. And yes, I do also have a couple of somewhat picky kids. The way I handle that is I don't make them eat every single thing, but I also don't make a special meal. So with something like this, some of the kids will just eat the sausage squash filling with a little bit of cheese. They won't necessarily scoop out every last bit of squash from the inside. Usually we'll serve a meal with butter bread as well. So if somebody really doesn't like it, that's not something I push super, super hard. But with a large family, I definitely can't be a short order cook making something for each person. If I had a kid that was really picky, maybe I would leave some sausage separate for that child or some apples. A lot of times when kids are really picky, it's just they don't want the food combined. I don't have anybody that's too bad with that. I can serve a meal just like this and expect that everyone will end up full. The older kids will all eat all of it. Some of the younger kids, usually the 3-year-old or the 2-year-old, typically with every kid I find, is a little bit more picky and then less so as they get older. So the kids that are 5 and up will eat all of this, no problem. The younger ones, they might be a little bit more finicky about it, but they will still find something from the meal that they'll enjoy. Now, I do tell kids that if they want to have the dessert, they do need to eat their food, at least a large majority of it. They can't just be waiting around for the dessert. That's one pitfall of having dessert is kids get used to that and then they will save their appetite for that. If they don't like the meal, they'll just figure, I'll get to eat when I have dessert. So I do try to be very aware of that. Not that food is the reward. I don't want to create that culture necessarily. But I also know that if you're going to serve dessert pretty often, like we do because my daughter loves baking so much, they can't just only eat dessert. So there's a balance there. It's not something I stress about a lot in my kitchen. I think that that's the kind of thing I maybe worried about more when I had younger kids and couldn't see the other end of it. And that even the pickiest of kids, or at least the pickiest my kids have been. I'm not saying I have super picky kids. So maybe this doesn't always work, but all of my kids that are over a certain age have grown out of it. And so it's just something I worry less about because I know that someday they're going to eat all the food. Whereas whenever my oldest was little, I might have thought she's never going to have a palate that will eat a wide variety of foods. Now at age 15, she eats everything. And so do all the older kids. So with that perspective, it's just not something that I worry about a lot, but I do get a lot of questions about it. So for you younger moms, it does get better. This is what a typical afternoon in the kitchen looks like. Clean up from lunch, that's all hands on deck. I strained off some turkey broth that has been simmering on the stove for about 3 days now. I just left it on the back there and kept adding more water and left it on the simmer function, shaping some rolls that I plan to use for dinner. I made the dough last night and then it rose all throughout the morning. I shaped them and then now they'll rise until it's time to bake for dinner. Doing some stretch and folds for tomorrow's bread. And then a fun thing that I'm trying for the first time, a cranberry orange sourdough wreath that I want to experiment with making all handmade gifts. Now I won't just do handmade gifts, but I like the idea of bringing this in addition or even as somebody's only gift. Consumables are nice for a lot of reasons. One is it's a lovely gift to get when someone spends their time making something from scratch, something that you just can't get anywhere. It's a thoughtful gift, but then also it doesn't clutter up somebody's house. So if you know somebody who already has everything they want, a lot of people over a certain age, maybe some personality types, when they want something, they just buy it. So it's really hard to find something they want for Christmas. But these kind of gifts, they're thoughtful. They can be very beautiful when packaged right. And so I have a few ideas to bring you this Christmas season for some of these beautiful handmade gifts. At this point in history, sourdough is just about at scale. So just about everybody on your list has probably heard of sourdough and probably wants to try it if they haven't already. So this one will be well received, very delicious, and also has a very nice presentation. To bring this together, I mixed up my sourdough cinnamon roll dough last night. You can find that over on the blog, farmhouseonboone.com. It's just search sourdough cinnamon rolls. So I just did the dough part. I did not add the baking soda and baking powder. You might ask why? Well, that's because I forgot. I completely forgot. It wasn't until after I was actually rolling it up that I remembered I forgot it. But it's okay. Whenever you add baking soda and baking powder to something sourdough, it makes it rise really fast, those additional leavening agents, so you don't have to give it a second rise. But if you don't use them, you can just use the active yeast that's in the sourdough, put it in a warm place, and let it rise again. For the cranberry filling, I did fresh cranberries, little lemon juice, a little orange zest, sugar, apple cider, and some butter. This is a lot like the cranberry sauce I make. I do have a recipe over on the blog, but it isn't exactly like that. Very similar, but with sugar instead of honey. The reason for that is I wanted it to be very thick, not runny at all. I knew that the runnier it was, the harder it would be to roll up and make into a wreath. Honestly, it was still a little bit tricky, but I did accomplish the purpose of making it a bit thicker with the sugar. I also, after warming it up and making the cranberries pop and turn into a jelly, I put it in the fridge so that it would go onto the cinnamon roll dough cold. That made it also easier to work with. If you haven't worked with cranberries, if you add a sweetener, a little bit of juice, and cook it on the stove, let it simmer for 20-30 minutes, they will pop and turn into a bit of a jelly, and that is what you're going for here. Orange and apple are always lovely additions to the flavor, and then put it in the fridge, let it be cool, add it to the spread out dough, and then roll it up, cut it down the middle, and twist it, and then form that into a wreath. You can do this exact shape with so many different flavors. I have done it with chocolate. I've done it with the classic cinnamon roll. Any fruit filling, you spread it on, roll it up, cut it, twist it. You can leave it as a long twist, like a pastry braid type of situation. I mean, really, that's done with pastry dough. But still, it's very beautiful. It'd be a good breakfast, or you can shape it into a wreath. I'm letting mine sit on the stove to rise while the girls work on a hot cocoa bar. A lot of families have this tradition during the colder months to bring out a hot cocoa bar. Now, it'd be really fun to leave it out all the time, but I mentioned the 6 boys earlier, lots of children, lots of small children. When they see things like this out, it's really hard for them to accept that they should eat anything but that. So it'll have to get put away. But I thought it would just be such a fun, cozy evening to put this together and then serve everyone hot cocoa. We really love doing charcuterie boards here in our home. So this felt kind of in that same realm of creativity and tradition. I was able to source healthy ingredients for this hot cocoa bar. The cocoa mix came from Farmhouse Teas. Everything in it is 100% organic and very quality. They also have marshmallows that are made with grass-fed beef gelatin, so they're paleo, dairy-free, grain-free. And then I found that Jovial makes organic einkorn cookies, Johanna whipped from scratch whipped cream. Of course, the candy canes are just candy canes, and then we put cinnamon and salt in some shakers. So mostly very high quality, healthy ingredients. What I did find, I will leave links for all of these ingredients in the description box below if you want to make a healthy hot cocoa bar for a fun Christmas family tradition. I baked the cranberry roll, but we're going to work on icing it tomorrow and packaging it up to make it beautiful tomorrow because I've run out of light. So now it's time to go around my house and bring out the cozy lighting. This is something I do every night, especially now that the Christmas tree is up. I have that cozy glow. I light all the lamps. I kind of get sad that the sun goes down so early, but I have to admit I really enjoy the way it looks to see a fire glowing through the glass. There is just something so restful about it. I'm going to use the dinner rolls I baked earlier as hamburger buns. I don't have any meat that's fully thawed, so I'm just going to do a loose meat burger sandwich. We diced some onions. I have some leftover roasted acorn squash. A few of the squash from Azure had a few spots on them, so I cut around those. I didn't stuff them and just roasted them with some olive oil and salt for a simple meal. Yesterday I made up an orange icing with 2 cups of powdered sugar, 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and then enough orange juice to make it spreadable. I put it in a Ziploc bag with the corner cut off and then put it in the fridge overnight because I ran out of light. Today I am drying oranges in the oven. I do that at the lowest my oven will go, which isn't very clearly marked, but I think somewhere around 275. That's a little high, but my oven won't go much lower. After icing it, I'm gonna use some dried oranges and cranberries to create a pretty gift. That you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family and that you enjoy this beautiful Christmas season that's coming up. Also, don't forget to check out Ritual. If you've been thinking about trying them, now is the time. You can get 40% off for a limited time by scanning my QR code here on the screen or using my link in the description box below.